Thank you. Thank you. I have to apologize. I lost my voice last Sunday and Monday. I have it back, enough to talk to you today. But I was teaching at SDSU last Saturday for a flower camp, which was basically for college students from SDSU, horticulture students, as well as cut flower growers. Oh. But if I get into a coughing fit, pay no attention. I'll stay a long ways away from you, and I'm not contagious. So, anyways, thank you again for having me here. My name again is Jenny Behlings. I owned Jenny's Floral in Custer for 35 years. I'd gone to the University of Minnesota in Waseca, Minnesota to take floral design and greenhouse management. It is now a women's prison. It has nothing to do with agriculture, which is too bad because they have a beautiful arboretum there. If you ever get to Waseca, Minnesota and can go and visit their arboretum, do that. It's wonderful. But today we're going to talk a little bit about cut flowers and basically South Dakota grown cut flowers, which doesn't really even seem like something that a person should be able to do when you think about the world and where most cut flowers come from. But how many of you in your own maybe home garden are already growing zinnias? Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe snapdragons, a few people. Or peonies, yeah. So you are already growing cut flowers, so it's not so unheard of. I had a flower shop for 35 years. I was very lucky to be involved in some large floral design organizations, such as the American Institute of Floral Design and the Society of American Florists based out of Washington, D.C. And there's a lot of cut flower growers in the United States that I got to meet and know, as well as Colombia and Ecuador. So it's really interesting to see what they're doing there, we can also do here in South Dakota. Since I retired 2 years ago, I sold my business to my manager, and I've gotten to go back to the garden. And Christine Lang and Rhoda and Laura Kaler, if you knew Laura from the South Dakota Specialty Producers, they kind of drew me in and asked me to help with this cut flower group. And I said, well, I don't grow cut flowers. And they said, well, you're a gardener, it's all the same. And working in Custer, in South Dakota, and like outdoor today, yes, I can garden. I can garden any day in South Dakota. It basically looks like that today. But really, today I want to cover things of the what, how, who, where, and why you may want to include cut flowers in your production. I'm going to tell you what to grow, how to grow it, who can grow it, and who is buying it, more importantly. How do you market your product and get it out to the consumer? Where you're growing, and why flowers, and why not. They are a good commodity, so it's something that you should really do. What to grow? Well, to start out with, you got to choose wisely. Like I said, we live in South Dakota. Some of us have very short growing seasons. Up in Custer, we have about a 90-day growing season, so it's very, very short. Succession growing is very smart. And so to be able to choose some things that maybe are cut and come again flowers, similar to zinnias or marigolds, those types of flowers. So we're going to start with some really easy ones to start out with. First of all, oops, I don't know if this is going to do it right or not. I had a really nice transition, but it didn't show it. So anyways, tulips is the first one. How many of you have tulips already planted in your garden for next year? A couple of you. Okay. Cut tulips are a little bit different than tulips that you maybe planted those bulbs 5 years ago, and now you have, they come up on their own in the spring, and you have a pretty flush of color and flowers, and then they die on the vine, and you leave those bulbs in the ground, and they come up again next year. They do the same thing over and over again. Cut tulips, you usually will plant the bulbs in the fall. They come up, and you pull those bulbs up with the flower and cut them off and throw them away. And the reason is you're not going to regenerate that bulb. You're taking the greens and all the foliage with it. You're cutting it off right at its prime. It's already given up all its energy to create and make that flower and those leaves. And so it's a waste. You throw that away, which pains my heart to do because I just feel like everything should have a chance to continue to regenerate and grow. But tulips are not grown that way. So quite often, and another thing about tulips and cutting them or growing them for cut flowers is that they will all come up and be in blossom, at perfect blossom at the right time. So when you have to cut them, you might have 500 flower stems to get rid of. So you have to have them be able to be cooled and kept for maybe in a cooler for up to a month, so that you can still sell them for Easter or maybe Mother's Day. But it's a one and done. You cut them, you take them off the bulb, and you sell them. So you hope to get them out the door pretty quickly. Tulips are easy just because you can do them in the fall, and you don't have to think about replanting them again or doing it in the spring when you're so busy doing other things. The next one is snapdragons. Snapdragons are so easy. The prettiest snapdragons I ever grew in my yard were planted by a bird. And they did such a beautiful job, and those they kept replanting themselves. They'd throw the seed if I left some of the blossoms on the stem, and then that next year, but it was in a rock pile, literally. There was no soil. I don't know what the heck they were growing in. Big, beautiful snapdragons, burgundy color, and so lovely. Inexpensive, easy to start the seeds early. You can direct sow them, or you can even start them indoors, but doesn't take an awful lot of work. They don't need heat mats to get them to germinate. Super, super easy. The seeds aren't so tiny that you're like overseeding or anything like that. But again, if a florist or if a consumer wants to find a nice flower that's going to be long lasting in their vase, snapdragons is it. And the plethora of colors that they come in is amazing. Next one is zinnias, and I brought that up to start out with because that is something, it's a kind of what we would consider an old-fashioned cottage garden type flower. They're very romantic feel to them. They have a great color palette from kind of the dusty colors to the bright, vibrant, saturated colors to small ones, big ones, spider shaped versus really round button type shapes to them. And the nice thing about zinnias, they grow in all kinds of conditions. It doesn't seem that they are attractant for some pests or anything like that. I haven't had a ton of worry about having, of course I have a really big fence because I have a lot of deer in my yard, but I haven't had a lot of problem with pests such as rabbits eating them. I don't know if any of you guys have had that kind of problem, but zinnias are great. The nice thing about zinnias is if you want to grow cut flowers and sell them to your local florist, they can't buy zinnias commercially. And the girls that are getting married nowadays know what zinnias are and they want them. So they come into the flower shop and they say, I want to get married, I'm looking at zinnia flowers, and the florist just panics because they don't have a source to get zinnias because they don't ship well. So if you're able to grow them at your farm or at your garden and be able to sell them to a bride that's getting married or to a florist that's doing her wedding flowers, zinnias are a good resource for some cash. And then of course the last one is sunflowers. They grow in every road ditch in South Dakota, and so sunflowers are a good one. I don't know if that's not going to take it, is it? Oh, there we go. A good one that anybody can grow. My grandfather would say they were all weeds. He never grew sunflowers as a crop, but I like growing the ones that branch, and then you get kind of the cut and come again. They'll branch again and send off more shoots, and you'll get more flowers. They get smaller and smaller. There's also a pro-cut sunflower, which has less pollen. So if a consumer wants something that's not going to drop a lot of pollen on their tablecloth, or maybe they have a lot of allergies, the pro-cut sunflowers are really great for that too. I feel like I need to ask you guys too. Those were pretty easy, so we'll come up with a few harder ones. But I do want to ask any of you, are any of you currently cut flower growers? Like, you're just kind of thinking about adding it. Okay, that's good, because I had a couple of cut flower farmers that may be coming to this event, so I'm glad that they're not sitting in here, because they all know how to do it, right? So here for the not so easy ones. These are maybe some flowers that you've never heard of before, unless maybe you recently were dealing with a wedding in your family, that maybe you had some of the dealings with the flowers, or that you've done cottage garden growing before. This first one up here, does anybody know what that is? It's called Nigella, or the common name is Love in the Mist. And it's a small flower, probably about the size of a bachelor button. Grows super easily. I winter sowed these last year, where I put them in a jug in the winter time of soil, wet soil, tape it up, and I throw it out in a snowbank, and it comes up on its own. It's like volunteer, but with a little greenhouse around it because it's got a milk jug. Yeah?
What is it called now?
What is this called? Nigella. Oh, let me see. I'll give you the spelling here. Come on, little computer. Nigella. And the nice thing about Nigella is brides like the words love in the mist. They think, oh, it's such a romantic. Forget-me-not is another one that they just love the name. But forget-me-nots are very hard, but it's all in the name. Sweet William, when Kate married William, she had to have Sweet William in her bouquet, which is basically a dianthus, right? It's a carnation. So I just think that's so sweet that they want to do that. The other nice thing about Nigella and using it as a cut flower in weddings, it's true blue. You just don't get very many blue flowers. Maybe some irises, sometimes delphinium, but to get that true blue color, it's not super big. Like I said, it's probably about the size of between a quarter and a 50-cent piece. But beautiful flowers. They hold up really well. Another nice thing about them is there's a second harvest because the seed pods puff up like little balloons, and they're kind of cool as a dried flower, and you can keep those and use them for dried flower arrangements in the fall. Very pretty. Almost like a hops looking type, but it's more puffy, like it's a balloon. Okay. Next, this flower, does anybody know what that is? What?
Is it ranunculus?
Ranunculus, yep. Don't be ridiculous, get some ranunculus, I always said. But ranunculus is a really pretty heavy or a high petal count flower. Looks like a really open rose. It can be anywhere, oh golly, like a disc. I don't know what I could compare it to. A small lid of a canning jar, a regular size canning jar lid, to even smaller, like a quarter or 50-cent piece, but usually they're a little bit larger. They're very expensive to buy. They grow by a corm, not a bulb, but it's a corm. And I don't know if they can be reused. Do you know, Rhoda, if that's something that once, I think that they regenerate because typically you don't take all the leaves off. But I think a lot of growers with ranunculus will get new corms every year just because they want a bigger production and they don't want to have to wait for that bulb or that corm to regenerate. Comes in really pretty colors. Gives you kind of a rose look without being a rose, but holds up very nicely. Boutonniere corsage work, it's very strong for that. That blush color that all the brides are still digging, it's a color that you can get in ranunculus very easily. But it's more expensive. I would say at a retail, this is going to cost just under what a rose would cost. But it's something different, and thus that's why brides are more interested in it. The next flower that we're going to talk about is delphinium. Delphinium is a perennial, so it is a root that continues to come back year after year, re-blossoms with not a lot of care, but it's a tall flower. These are hybrid delphiniums, which can be up to waist high. The blossom itself. So unless you have some kind of trellising or netting to keep it from tipping over, wind can be an issue, and we do have wind in South Dakota, go figure. And so it's really difficult to keep those without them. They're a hollow stem, so a little bit of wind can knock them over quite quickly and easily. So keep that in mind. But again, there is some blue colors, which is really nice. The white and the dusty pink is beautiful too. And real royal purple on the delphinium. But this flower can sell for $5 to $8.
Are those similar to hollyhock?
Not really. Closer to larkspur, probably. But it's a hollyhock usually reseeds, and I think it's a biennial. Comes back every other year or blossoms every other year, but it gives you kind of that height. It's not quite as tall. And when you cut these, they actually hold up quite a while. You would cut them early stages. These are probably beyond being cut because they're not going to last that much longer. But then early morning, when they're just starting to set color, and then you cut them and harden them in, put them in warm water with floral preservative, put them in a cooler, and the coolers that we use for cut flower storage keep around 36 to 38 degrees. Sounds really cold, but it helps to make them turgid, and the water that gets up into the stem makes them sturdier and tougher, and they are less likely to be wilty looking. So those would have to be kept in a nice cool location for that. The next item is peonies, and you guys all said you know peonies pretty well. They are a very early spring flower for us. In Alaska, they grow them amazing. They're peony crops up there, large cut flower farms in Alaska for peonies, and it's because of their long days and the cool temperatures. They like that. I don't know if they still have ants on them. I assume they have ants on them, but usually when peonies are cut and shipped, they're a hard ball. They're not even opened up, and sometimes you're not real certain that it's going to be the color that they said it's going to be, but I mean, if it's burgundy, it's burgundy, but the white ones sometimes pop out and they have more pink on them than real white, but they're interesting flowers to me. Again, a big focal flower probably sells retail for in that $8 price range for a peony, but it's a short season. Peonies do come, they don't cut and come again, but they are a perennial, so they come back year after year with very little work and effort. And the last one I should have asked you before I pushed that button is scabiosa. Terrible name for a pretty flower, but it is a pretty beautiful flower. Has anybody ever grown scabiosa in here? Really pretty. The common name is pincushion flower, and the reason, I mean, it kind of looks like a pincushion in here, but the reason the seed pod looks like a real sturdy dandelion, that puffball, but it's real sturdy and hard, and so it really looks like a pincushion. This is white, but it also comes in kind of that dusty pink and lavender and even dark purple color. Burgundy too, I believe scabiosa has some. There's scoops, there's different varieties of scabiosa, but a really pretty, long-lasting, and usually these buds do develop and create a flower too, so you'd use all of those buds. These would be more of a cut and come again. You'd keep cutting it off and they'd keep coming back. And again, these flowers, just because they're a little harder to grow, you can ask a little bit more expensive price for them. Now the premium flowers, very hard to grow, or much more harder to grow. And I would assume most people know what that one is. Dahlia, yep. Dahlias are a tuber, and here in South, well, at least where I live, we'd have to dig them. Similar to like a gladiola bulb, you'd have to dig it up in the fall so it wouldn't freeze in the ground here. A lot of cut flower growers will grow dahlias, and they'll save those tubers, dig them up, and then they sell some of their tubers, and then they replant, keep some for a crop for the following year. Dahlias can come quite small, like 3 to 4 inches across, or they can be dinner plate dahlias, which are literally that big. They're very fragile, and for shipping them, if you lose their compound flowers, so if you lose one petal, then the whole thing kind of explodes eventually. Similar to like a football mum, if you've ever seen a football mum, you take one petal off, the rest just keep coming. Yeah.
How do you ship them then if they're so?
That's the problem. They ship them, and usually when I would be to ordering them for a wedding, I'd order double. And then I'd hope that I had enough to finish my wedding. So there's the premium part of it. They're so expensive and they're so hard to get. The stems have a tendency to bend and break and that kind of thing too. You end up wiring them and creating new stems on them. If I would get some in and I had to like salvage one, I would take wherever I could see that the petal was missing, and I'd drip wax or glue, hot glue down in there to hold that in there and just hope it would make it through the event, and then it's gone. I mean, they're just a really touchy flower. So, but dahlias, again, you could probably retail for $5 to $8 per stem. So again, it's a lot of money when you're talking about, but it's a harder one to grow, and you might not have the big crop as you think.
But you're suggesting that perhaps we could approach local boutiques and stuff because the transportation would be shorter.
Correct.
They might buy from us.
And they would be more interested in buying from you on some of these flowers, first of all, that they can't get anywhere else, and the fact that they're fresh cut, you know, a day or two, where a lot of the flowers that are coming from other parts of the world maybe have been in transit already for a week from once they were cut off the plant. They're kept cool and they have it figured out, but still it gets to that point that you're like, oh, the length of that you can pull out of these flowers to last longer is so much better than what we can get from some of the international growers. Let's see, Dahlia, didn't push my button soon enough. This one is one that maybe you've never heard of before, Lisianthus. It's becoming more popular in cut flower floral shops, and actually very easy to get at flower shops because it's grown internationally and commercially. But the nice thing about it is the length of time it's going to last because it's grown locally and there's less transportation time on it. Lisianthus is quite hard to grow. Germination is really tough. You usually have to, if you're starting the seeds, you have to start them in December in order for them to be ready to put out in April or May. And then they should probably be grown in a high tunnel where they're going to be somewhat protected from any frost or hail or wind or anything like that. They don't like to have water spots on them. They get botrytis. I mean, there's lots of different things about Lisianthus. But it's such a beautiful flower. You get a lot of flowers off of one plant. And so it's less than a rose, but it kind of looks like a rose. So, and this purple color, brides love that. It comes in white, a real dark purple. I think there's a pink. There might be a pale, pale yellow, kind of a cream color. But Lisianthus is really fun. A lot of cut flower growers will buy plugs or have been pre-started for you. Much, much easier to deal with, and you can just put them, get the plugs, have them shipped, and then brought in. And there's a resource for that, but I can't think of where it is right now. But I'll send that to SPA and have them send it out to at the end if you're looking for plugs. And the last one is a garden rose. And any rose, by any name, is still a rose, right? But they, garden roses, brides know what they are, and they're asking for garden roses. Because of the fragrance, they actually smell like a rose. They're more of an old-fashioned heirloom variety. Growing them here is quite difficult, but they do grow them in Minneapolis. Leadbush Roses is out of Minneapolis, and they have rose greenhouses, which it's so crazy. If you ever get up there and can go do a tour, go, because it's so interesting. When you think about roses, you think it should be a flush of all this beautiful color, but it's not. There's one there, and there's one over there, and there's one over there, and they walk around on drywall stilts to cut them, because the rose bushes are 7 or 8 foot tall. And so the guys are walking around and they're cutting one here and they're cutting one there because they don't come on all at the same time. And anyways, the greenhouses at Leadbush Roses, they heat all with biomass. They have a deal with Minneapolis St. Paul to take all their yard waste and they burn it in boilers at their greenhouses. And actually Minneapolis St. Paul pays them and brings it to them. They pay them to take it and brings it to them. So they don't have any cost of heating their greenhouses in the wintertime. They get paid to heat their greenhouses. It's such a great deal. I'm like, you guys have really figured it out. And he goes, yeah, if we can figure out how to get the cooling in the summer when it's so damn hot and we have to cool these greenhouses. But he said, yeah, for the wintertime, it's really wonderful that they don't have to pay for fuel oil or any electricity or anything to heat their greenhouses. It's quite interesting how they do it. Leadbush, L-E-N-B-U-S-C-H. Okay, how are you going to grow it? Or more importantly, in South Dakota, how are we going to keep it alive? Beautiful flowers, too bad they're going to be dead soon. I used to, as a florist, I'd get gentlemen at this week of the year, Valentine's Day, I don't want to buy her flowers, they're just going to die. And I'll say to him, well, you're going to die too someday, and she keeps you around. So, you know, it all comes around. Touche, they say. Okay, starting them early. Like I said, the Lisianthus, you have to start them early, and you have to have premium conditions for them. They like to have humidity, so they have to have a humidity dome. They like to have heat, so they have little heat mats that they set the trays on, undergrow lights, all this kind of stuff. And they germinate so long, you're just like sitting there for 3 weeks going, there's nothing. And finally there's a little fuzz and you're like, whoa! So the Lysianthus are tough like that. Most things aren't that tough. The tulips, obviously, it's great to be able to plant them in the fall and when you're not quite so busy. Dividing is another thing. The peonies and some of the delphinium and the things that are perennials that you can divide and get more plants, that's a great time to do that in the fall also. Seed starting usually starts, has anybody ever winter sowed? Do you know what I'm saying when I say winter sowing? It's the milk jugs out in the snowbank. Look it up. There's like thousands of YouTube videos about winter sowing. You start after the winter solstice, so anytime after Christmas, you can start filling these jugs up with flowers or plants. It's great for herbs, any perennials that you want to start. I started asparagus this way from seed. It was so beautiful, and it really took hold. And you know, when you think about you have to have 15-year roots for asparagus or different things like that, winter sowing is kind of the way to do it. I just really enjoyed it, using old milk jugs and taping them back up, throwing them in a snowbank, let them snow on them, let them freeze, whatever. But seed starting very early, and then you can play in the dirt in January and February. It's wonderful. You'll have to harden off most of your plants. This is a cold frame where she's taking them out and letting them get hardened off. And then, of course, direct sowing is the best because you can throw zinnias down, you can put snapdragons down, marigolds. A lot of people don't realize marigolds are a really great cut flower. In the larger metropolitan areas where there's a lot of folks from India that live in those areas and they have Indian weddings, they love marigolds and they make garlands out of marigolds like crazy. If you wanted to do a little hands-on demonstration with some of your customers or maybe little kids, stringing marigolds on a string to make a necklace or a flower crown, super easy, and kids love that. You need to protect a lot of your flowers, and if you're already gardening, as far as market gardening or growing vegetables, you probably already used some of these items. The first one over here is a low tunnel with more of a frost cloth on it, used to protect in the spring, early spring, against maybe a little touch of frost, or in the fall, as well as some pests that might get in underneath and create problems for you. Hail, we have a ton of hail in Custer. I mean, it's not summer, right? Unless it's hailing someplace. Then, of course, high tunnels, and NRCS is a great resource to get a high tunnel if you're interested in that. I have a 30 by 60 high tunnel that I bought just on my own because I wanted to put raised beds in it. I live on a rock, literally. There's no soil at all in our yard. And so we had to build raised beds and fill them with soil and compost. High tunnels are wonderful, especially for any crops like the Lysianthus, the ranunculus, that don't like to have any water from above, and rain could cause a lot of botrytis. This is stock that's in this particular greenhouse or high tunnel. And I don't know if you've ever smelt stock. It smells so good when it's fresh, but when it goes bad so bad. It smells like rotten cabbage. So it must be in the brassica family. I don't know that for sure, but when it's good, it's really, really good. So, and then down here is zinnias in a field. Zinnias are very tolerant of a lot of different things, and so they can take a lot of heat. They can take a little pressure from pests. Here they happen to use fabric down, and then they probably burned holes in the fabric to place the plants down in to keep the weed pressure off of them a little bit. They may have irrigation underneath that fabric or laid across the top, so if it actually is not plastic, it would permeate a woven fabric of some kind. And it looks like plastic on these ones. This is, again, snapdragons. And this is the netting that they would use horizontally to keep them from tipping over in the wind. And sometimes they'll do a second level up above, though we asked about that at the cut flower farmers gathering last weekend, and most of them said no, by the time they're up through here, they're fine. But you do have to have it up high enough. Some people were putting them like 8 inches off the ground, and they're like, no, they need to be about a foot or closer to 18 inches off the ground because they grow so fast that the leaves would push the netting down if it was too low. And this way it's up higher, so it basically captures those the flower heads instead of all the leaves. Yeah?
How do you pick them?
You keep your rows fairly narrow, but you could reach in and grab them. I would say your rows shouldn't be more than 3 foot wide, especially for this, or that you could reach in 3 foot and go around on the other side and be able to reach in. And as you're picking, I'll talk a little bit about that because I don't really get into that. Harvest of them is, you have to time it correctly as far as what the development of the flower is and make sure that it's not too late or not too early, and do it in the cool of the day, keep in the morning or at night, and keep them cool, put them into buckets of water immediately. But usually what they'll do is they have a clipper in, and they go over and they find the right one, they cut it, and they strip it, right? They're taking those lower leaves off. And they may get a small bundle. They maybe are bundling them into bundles of 10 or 15, and then they put a rubber band around. They have buckets close by to them with water already and the floral preservative, and they just drop them in there. And then they continue to go and cut and then bundle and put them right into the flower buckets so that they have floral preservative right away and they're able to uptake that. The floral preservative usually is in warmer water, like about 100, 110 degrees, and they'll uptake that quickly. Then once you can move those buckets into the cooler, then you drop them right in and let them sit for about 2 hours in a cooler, which would be set at that 36 to 38 degrees. And that'll harden your flowers, and they'll probably last in that cooler, ready for full retail selling for up to 2 weeks. And it's interesting to me how long they grow, but you'd want to use real floral preservative too. They do make, a lot of people have home remedies of flower type food, like sugar, 7-Up, pennies, Bear aspirin. I mean, there's all different kinds of things that I've heard that you crush up and put in the water. Don't do any of them. Just go by Floral Life or Chrysal are the two main companies that sell, and I can send that to it. Chrysal is Crysal. It's like crystal, but it's Chrysal. It's more for large production farms, but you can get bulk and run it through a dosatron if you've ever used a dosatron to dose your fertilizer or your other things for greenhouse growing or gardening or whatever. Or you can just take a scoop of it, so many scoops per gallon of water, and mix it that way too. You don't have to have the fancy mechanism thing. Dosatron, D-O-S. Oh, Chrysal and Floral Life, F-L-O-R. There's an A in there and then L-I-F-E, Floral Life. There's a wholesaler in Sioux Falls called North American Wholesale. And if you have a tax ID number, you can go there and purchase a lot of those chemicals from them directly. And that's all you need is a tax ID number and walk right in. You can get them for wholesale cost. So basically, we're giving those flowers everything that they need to produce a pretty flower. The correct water, the correct light. Light, even when you're out in the field, keep in mind some things don't like strong direct light. Lily of the Valley only grows in the shade. So those types of things that you want to keep in the right location. Fertilizer or healthy soil. One of our flower farmers that was helping me co-teach last weekend, she had started her flower farm where an old feedlot had been. And her husband tilled it up, and he has a seed company, and so he did some soil testing on it, and he says, she goes, what said we should do this and put some of this in and some of that? And he goes, you don't need it. This soil is so composted and so beautiful, it'll grow whatever you put in it. And they haven't fertilized it for 5 years. She goes, I know the day is coming. I'm going to have to supplement something in there. But look at your soil test. You don't know unless you do the test. The correct temperature, so there, as far as putting it out at the right time, some things are more cold tolerant than other things. And of course, your perennials, if they grow well in your area, they're much more cold tolerant. They know what they're to expect there. Timing and succession planning to be really good as far as some of those things, such as zinnias, marigolds. You can succession plant those like every 2 weeks, And that's about the right amount of time. So put some more in. And then as these others have their big flush and they're starting to dwindle, the next ones will start. And then the next ones. But 2 weeks is about the right time for most succession planting. Harvest, we talked a little bit about that. Cooling in a cooler. Care and handling, a chain of life. That is actually a true thing, the chain of life that's been developed by large commercial growers from nationwide or worldwide, where they cut at the correct time, they cool, and then when they're transporting, like they're sending them in airplanes. All the cut flowers that come into our country or that are imported into our country come through the port in Miami. There's one airport, they all come through that port. And then they're shipped to different locations for wholesalers. But the whole time that these flowers have been from the field to the consumer, they've been kept at that cold temperature, 36 to 38 degrees. And you can't believe that they can still sell a rose for less than $5 when you think about all that's gone into air shipping those roses from Ecuador and Colombia. They're better traveled than I am, and I don't like that. I want to be able to travel that much. But it's just amazing to me that you can still sell that for less than the cost of a Hallmark card. And so it is amazing, and being able to do this and run the same chain of life within the local community here in South Dakota, you'll get so much more profit out of it and less loss. So you can always look up that chain of life. It's a whole thing. There's a big thing of it. Record keeping is essential. So know when you've planted, and then you can follow through next year and see what you have, what you've reaped out of those particular varieties, that type of succession planting, and then know what you need to do for the next year. These are some of the top exporters in the world. The Netherlands actually exports 52% of all flowers that go anywhere in the world. And yes, a lot of them are grown in the Netherlands, but they actually come from other countries. These are just the exporters. The large flower markets and auctions are there in the Netherlands. But the other 25% come out of the two countries, Colombia and Ecuador. Those are roses. Almost all our roses in the world are grown in Colombia and Ecuador. And most of them are grown in greenhouses. But they're up in the mountains. They have a great climate, a lot of sunshine. I want to go there too someday. That's a bucket list thing. There are a lot of flowers grown in the United States, obviously, but we don't export any of our flowers out of the United States. They can get them from the Netherlands, basically. There's a large amount of flowers grown in South Africa. Protea, if you've ever heard of Protea, they're a tropical flower. They kind of look like a cactus flower. Some of them can be quite large. Some can be very, very small. But I think there's thousands of different types of varieties of Protea that are grown in Ecuador. Here's the United States is one of the biggest producers of foliages. Greenery, ferns, tropical foliage in Florida is a big business down there. Obviously, too, green plants, tropical plants, any plants that you'd be growing in your house would be coming from Florida. But again, here's some of those smaller, more cottage type things. Scabiosa, snapdragons. You can see Minneapolis. There's Len Bush is up here. You know, that's what they're selling. Ranunculus, zinnias. There's a few other things. Amaranth, which is actually a grain that people will grow. Love Lies Bleeding. Brides love it because it says love in the name. And so Love Lies Bleeding is one that I think it's quite terrifying to even think about that, but they like that. And then anemone is another one. I believe that's also a corm. Is that correct, Rhoda? Anemone or bulb? Tiny little bulb, yeah. Very fun, pretty flowers, but don't ship well, so nice. And then the peonies up in Alaska, and tropical flowers in, obviously, Hawaii. I gotta keep moving because I'm gonna run out of time. Oh my gosh, okay. Who are the South Dakota cut flower producers? Well, let's rattle through these folks real fast if I can get this darn thing to go. Okay, South Dakota cut flower growers, we have 30 plus farms. 3 years ago, I think we had 9. So people are getting excited about it, and basically, they're adding it to their own businesses that they're already farming traditional farming. So the first one is Yellowbird Farms, and I'm going to read most of this. I asked 4 different farmers to give me kind of a bio about themselves and answer some questions. This is Rhonda Larson from Hayti, South Dakota. Anybody up near Hayti? Up south of Watertown, right? South, yeah, okay. Rhonda's been in business for 5 years, growing and selling cut flowers. One of her favorites to grow is Lysianthus. There's her Lysianthus, the one that I am terrified to grow because it is hard to start. She starts them in her basement mid-December using grow lights and heat mats. She also grows within a 30 by 100 foot high tunnel, which she got through NRCS. It's a beautiful high tunnel. She and her husband farm on his family's homestead where they grow corn and beans. 2 of their daughters are close enough to help when she has events such as cut yourself, you cut flower events at the farm. Rhonda sells direct to customers through farmers markets and in a local boutique. She does weddings and where she'll sell a bucket of flowers to a bride, a do-it-yourself bride. The bride says, I want these colors, and she'll send them with a bucket full of flowers, and they put them together themselves, which is kind of nice. And other occasions. She loves being active in her community and hosts you-pick-it events at her farm. Some flowers she has or wants to try include tulips, fall mums, early snapdragons, eucalyptus, which I didn't think would grow here, but people are growing eucalyptus like crazy, and big scoop scabiosa. So Rhonda Larson of Yellowbird Farms, and I got a couple other pictures of her stuff. There's her greenhouse, again, her high tunnel, and some of the little bouquets that she sells. Rudbeckia, look at all the different colors of these sunflowers, these little Rudbeckias. Stunning. Okay, next one. Wild Gypsy Farm, Jeanette Chelma, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Chelmo, of Kimball, South Dakota. Does anybody know where Kimball's at? Somewhere, yes, close to you guys, okay. So Jeanette has been growing flowers on and off since 2003 when she grew her flowers for her own wedding, which obviously works because she's got 4 lovely children. Through the first 10 years of marriage, they were in Wisconsin. She expanded her knowledge while in Wisconsin by taking master gardening training. Then in 2013, they moved back to South Dakota to the family ranch and farm, and Jeanette started growing more flowers, which she sold to local florists. So she was selling just wholesale. She does weddings and special events now, and this year has started offering a bouquet subscription plan. So it's kind of like a CSA, but you sign up for a 1 month or 2 month or whatever bouquet subscription, and you get a bouquet sent every few weeks. Look at these tulips. Isn't that cool? And when you think about that she's going to pull and throw all these tulip bulbs away, it's so sad. Grows a large array of flowers, including zinnias, Lysianthus, marigolds, Rudbeckia, eucalyptus, celosia, snapdragon stock, asters, sunflowers, dianthus, basil, mint, and phlox, sweet peas, ageratum, peonies, dahlias, tulips, ranunculus, and anemone, hoping to add chrysanthemums and lilies. One thing she was most proud of and said that she had not given up. It's hard to work and battle hail, grasshoppers, drought, and crop failure. Just made it more rewarding that she kept her flower farm going. She said she had a lady come one time. They also have a cow-calf operation, and they had a lady come and pick up a bottle calf that she'd bought from them, and she had just harvested a bunch of dahlias, and she gave this lady a bouquet of flowers, and the lady was just so touched. She says, no one has ever given me flowers before. And she's like, well, you got to stop that. You got to fix that. But there's some stock. This is stock, Lysianthus, as well as scabiosa on the far end there. Eclectic Barnyard Flower Farm, Jamie Sleep of Canastota. She was at my class this last weekend, and she was so funny. She said she was from Canastota, and she kept saying, do you know where that's at? And I'm like, yes, we all know where Canastota's at, because you see the Ortman Clinic, right? Everybody went there to get their chiropractor appointments. So anyways, they have a beautiful farmstead. Jamie has been growing flowers for 2 years, though the first year all was wiped out by the derecho, but her father-in-law helped her salvage her structures. She had a high tunnel that had gotten wiped out, and seedlings, and pick up the pieces. He and his wife had farmed there for 50 years, so Jamie and her husband are carrying on the family farm as well as a small antique store on site. She grows And here's the antique store. You can kind of see as they set it up for Christmas and different things. She grows sunflowers, zinnias, grophia, Ami, I don't know what Ami is, but Celosia status, asters, snapdragon, salvia, rudbeckia, and cosmos. She offers you pick it, selling as well as a great venue for photography and small events. She's interested in the ag tourism portion of this. She would like to partner with the town of Canastota to bring more people to their little part of South Dakota. Her biggest surprise is growing flowers was first of all that she could grow so many different types and that they would actually grow in the state of South Dakota, and that because she grew up in Michigan, and that all were so beautiful. Jamie is proud of her little farm and hopes to have lots more visitors in the years to come. So these are some of the photo shoots that they have the local high school seniors come out and get their pictures taken. And the last is Eden Acres Mini Eden out of Alpena, South Dakota, which is just southwest of Huron. Very much where I grew up southwest of Huron. And in fact, Mindy's parents bought a piece of property for my dad, so she owns part of my family heritage. I think that's pretty cool. Mindy had worked at a retail flower shop before having children, which she spent a lot of time having children. She spent 18 years of her life having her 7 children. She homeschooled them all at their family farm, where when their last child was born in 2020, she decided to try a new adventure and has been super happy and successful. She is ready to do something that she was passionate about, but also something to add value to their farm as another, they had a cow cattle operation and they wanted to add something else that could bring in some revenue. And cow cattle was king, but this gives the kids and herself time to spend time together and other ideas of opportunities. They want to pass their operation on to their children, and if they have other things that they're interested in, such as the flower farming, they could do that too. Working a multi-generational farm. She grows it all from greens like pennycress, which is actually, I think, a noxious weed, feathered grasses, wheat, millet, amaranth, fennel, oregano, basil, and flowers such as zinnias, sunflowers, lizzie, cosmos, celosia, tulips, and ranunculus. Mindy sells through bouquet subscriptions and classes for make and take. So people come in, they make a little bouquet, and they take it home with them. She also is selling bulk flowers for do-it-yourself for brides and pre-wrap bouquets at a local coffee shop and winery. She says she has gotten advice early on to just pick a few easy ones and get started, but she couldn't help herself, and she wanted to grow all the flowers. So let's look at what she's got here. She has a beautiful farm. I mean, some of these grasses like this, you see those explosion grass, a lot of things that people would call weeds, it's what she's selling. And there's some of the classes that she was teaching where they were doing flowers in a pumpkin, and here they were decorating wreaths with dried flowers. Okay, so why should you grow flowers? Why not? The Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers had a conference last fall down, I want to say in South Carolina, I'm not positive about that. Anyways, Melinda Newth, PhD of North Carolina State University, had this nice slide which I scalped from one of our cut flower farmers who is at this conference, and she did a little presentation about it at our last meeting. And I thought this was very interesting. The consumer spending on flowers increased by 2.8% last year. Consumer spending on flowers expected to increase by 5% by 2028. People are interested in something that makes them happy, and flowers make them happy. People want things that enhance their quality of life. Social media has driven this. 74% of consumers rely on social media to guide their purchases, right? Online consumers spend 40% more. And 25% of online buyers follow a flower farmer, grower online. So if you're buying from that farmer, you're also following them, and they're your new best friend because you know who they are and what they're doing at their farm, and you want to push your money towards them and not the Walmarts and not the big box stores that are out there. So this was very eye-opening for me, and I can speak to it as a retail floral shop. Of course, I was buying stuff from all over the world, but when COVID hit And our little state of South Dakota didn't close down. Praise the Lord, because I was able to keep my shop open, and I had the biggest year I've ever had. People were just dying to send flowers to their loved ones that they couldn't go visit or see. Our nursing home was actually closed down, and they wouldn't let us take deliveries until Mother's Day, the first Mother's Day in May. And our gal called, and she said, "Be prepared. I'm calling all the families of all our residences, men or women, and saying, flowers are coming on Mother's Day. So if you miss Dad's birthday, send them on Mother's Day." So we took 5 van loads full of flowers to that one delivery spot. It was awesome. And we really had a fantastic year. Now, I had friends who had flower shops in upstate New York that they had to close their doors. And the wholesalers all closed, so then they couldn't get flowers from their wholesalers. It was horrible, horrible. They ended up losing their businesses. They maybe lost all their employees. And it was just really not the right thing. So we were very lucky that we were so rural that we were able to stay in business and be able to have doors open. But I see that the consumer spending on flowers, people don't care. They want something nice. They want something that means something to someone. So they're spending that money. Okay, so maybe you should consider cut flowers. It just might be the perfect match. Look at how happy they are. I did that flower bouquet for that girl. And it's not out of my garden, but it's just perfect. So thank you all very much. Do you have any questions for me? This is my contact information. I live in Custer, just outside of Custer. I would love to host anybody. If you are out in the Custer area, just give me a call and you can come see my operation. It's more of a vegetable garden and high tunnel, but I'm growing in weird conditions, mile high altitude and short growing season. But any other questions? Yes?
You sell most of your flowers to individuals, or are you going to the flower shops and selling?
Well, I actually sold my flower shop to my manager, and I've given her flowers. I have not sold her any flowers yet, and I'm just getting started, but I feel like if I do more cut flowers, like zinnias and things like that, I could probably sell them direct to her. Now, I do want to be able to teach classes at my garden. That's probably more of my thought as far as teaching classes or design elements. So I would have people come, they'd pay a certain price, and then they'd make a bouquet and take it away. That's probably how I'm going to push that more so. I don't really want to be in competition with her. I don't want to do daily bouquets to the funeral home or to I don't even really want to do weddings anymore. I'll go help her with that. But I think for me personally, I would be much happier to be able to teach classes and send the flowers out in that direction.
Classes about what? How to grow the flowers?
How to design them, how to put them in a vase or make an arrangement or make a flower crown or that type of stuff. People love that, just to have that hands-on interaction and take something away afterwards and enjoy it. And then they may go to a flower shop. I don't feel that competition is a real thing in the floral industry, because anybody who sells flowers, they're there so that person can buy flowers. Even my grocery store, when they have flowers, I can't be open 24/7, but the grocery store might be open until 9 o'clock at night, and somebody needs flowers. Thank goodness they can go to the grocery store and buy flowers for that person. So that's how I've always felt about it in my little community. I was really the only flower shop in town most of the time. I had a couple years where there were several other shops, but we always worked really well with each other. I'd say, hey, do you need help? I see that you have a big funeral coming in. Do you need some extra flowers? You can borrow them from me and we'll get them back, or something like that. But I think on a farm, like all these ladies that I talked about, the 4 of them, all were on homesteaded family farms, multi-generational farms, and they're using it as kind of a experience where people come out. They have the You Pick 'em events, maybe from 4 till dusk at night. They give people a little cup or a jar, and the mason jar, and they go out and they fill that with however many stems they can pack in there, and then they pay $10 or $8 or whatever. But then they have live music. They might have cupcake wagon there selling that, or they might have somebody there taking pictures or whatever, and people can wander around and they just love that. And then when they do want flowers, then they'll call her and say, could you do a bouquet for me, or could I have you cut me a bouquet and I'll come pick it up, or I'll get it at the farmer's market the following week. A lot of them sell through farmers markets, which are really a great opportunity. And if you're already selling other vegetables or things through a farmer's market, this is just an add-on that you could easily throw next to some of those broccoli and cauliflower. Any other questions? Anybody gonna grow some cut flowers? You're already growing cut flowers, right? Good deal, good deal. Well, thank you all for coming today, and I hope you have a great conference.